Some of the most important decisions you will make in your design business are going to happen when they don't feel urgent. And no client's going to be demanding an answer. No deadline's going to be flashing red, and no employee's going to be outside your office. In fact, these decisions are remarkably easy to postpone because the business appears to be functioning without them until suddenly it is not functioning without them. And one day you realize one client represents most of your revenue, and you discover that the business can operate, or cannot operate rather, for a week without you. You look at years of beautiful projects and realize you don't have rights to photography, documentation, or the permission needed to market them properly. Or maybe you recognize that you built a company around the work you happen to receive rather than the work you intentionally chose and desired for your company. Maybe it's more internal. You reach this point where you feel like you're breaking and realize the business has no ability to accommodate the life that you really want. And today I want to talk about the decisions that I wish more interior designers made before circumstances made those decisions for them. Because mature businesses are not built only by solving today's problems, they are built by protecting tomorrow's options. Welcome back to Success by Design, the podcast where we talk honestly about building an interior design firm that is creatively exceptional, financially stable, and capable of supporting the life of the person who owns it. As a business coach for interior designers and an active interior designer myself, I know what I'm talking about because I'm not observing this industry from a distance. I'm working through the same questions you are. What are we going to say yes to? Where should we invest? Which opportunities belong to the future of the firm and which are simply distractions dressed up as revenue? And who needs to be protected contractually? See, these are not dramatic questions. They are responsible ones from a business owner. And the strongest designers I know, they are willing to answer them before they are forced to do so. Imagine that your business has been operating successfully for years. You have a recognizable body of work and you have clients who trust you. You have vendor relationships, a growing reputation, and a full calendar. And you even made it through the difficult years, maybe COVID. But something subtle begins to happen in your company and it's becoming more complex. Maybe there's more files and more accounts and projects and conversations and promises and historical knowledge. And you're no longer just designing rooms or buildings. Instead, you're all of a sudden managing this entire ecosystem. And yet many of the decisions governing that ecosystem were made accidentally. And you offer a service because one client asked for it 3 years ago. And then you start using a pricing structure because that was the template you started with, or you read something on Instagram from another coach about how that would be a good idea. See, one person knows how to access a critical account, but nobody else can break into it. And maybe they're out on maternity leave. And the project photography lives in a bunch of scattered folders. See, nothing is technically broken in any of these scenarios, but everything is way more fragile than it appears. Then something changes. Maybe a client pauses the project, or a vendor relationship ends, or a health issue requires you to actually step away. And none of these events are unusual in and of themselves. The issue is that the firm never made the decisions that would actually reduce the impact of these things happening. You may not be able to say when they're going to happen, but odds are they're going to happen. And when designers start feeling this vulnerability, they often default to, well, I've got to get more organized. New software, new folders, bring on the checklist, time to attend a seminar. They promise themselves that they will clean everything up during a slower season. I don't know about you, but I have not had a lot of slower seasons if I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. And organization can help, but organization is not the same as strategy. Organization is not the same as strategy. So you can organize an unstable business beautifully. You can document a service that you no longer should be providing. And you can streamline a client relationship that creates dangerous revenue concentration. The deeper problem here is that strategic decision-making is not happening. And that can only come from you. You've not decided how dependent the company is allowed to become on exactly one client. You've not decided what knowledge must belong to that business rather than to you as the owner. You have not decided what must be legally protected, and you've not decided what the business must be capable of doing without you. I get that that's scary, but it's imperative. See, these are not administrative questions you can outsource to your executive assistant. These are leadership questions you have to sit with in the seat of your soul and figure out how you want to drive your company. I'm going to give you 6 business decisions today that I see successful interior design firms tending to make before they appear necessary to be made. These are not emergency decisions. They're not knee-jerk decisions. Instead, these are optionality decisions. Optionality means you preserve the ability to choose. You can decline a bad opportunity because no single client controls the survival of your company. And you can step away temporarily because information and authority are not just inside of you. They've been thoughtfully distributed to the appropriate people. You can pursue better work because your portfolio and positioning reflect where you are going, not where you have been. And you can change direction because the business was not built around a fragile assumption. And that is the goal. It is not to eliminate risk. It is avoiding being trapped by it. All right, decision one. I want you to decide how much client concentration is too much. And I get it. A lot of times we celebrate landing a big client, and you should celebrate. That's great. A strong client relationship can absolutely transform a firm. But if a single client represents a substantial portion of your revenue, that client has more influence over your company than may be obvious. Their payment timing affects your cash flow, your staffing, maybe your workload. And because that relationship is financially important, you may begin making exceptions for them that you would never make for another client. And let me just tell you, that is not healthy. Whether you choose to stretch payment terms or accept a work that doesn't fit, or maybe you tolerate communication patterns that disrupt the team. Maybe you delay developing other relationships because the current pipeline feels really secure until it is not. The decision to make sooner is not, should we stop working with large clients? Absolutely not. That's not what I'm saying. The decision is, how concentrated are we willing to become, and what will we do when we approach that threshold? For example, you might decide that no single client should routinely represent more than a certain percentage of projected annual revenue. And that percentage is going to depend on your model, but the discipline to that percentage matters more than the number itself. Because once you see concentration increasing, you do not panic or undermine the relationship. Instead, you start intentionally strengthening other channels. We went through this in my company. We had one major client, and I did not want to put all my eggs in that singular basket. And we began diversifying through very strategic marketing decisions about 5 years ago. You can pursue other clients. You can build visibility in additional markets. And a major client should be viewed as an asset, but they should not quietly become your emergency plan, marketing plan, or an entire pipeline for your company. All right, let's talk about decision two. Decide what knowledge must belong to the company. And most firms I have seen, at least if you're growing, you have an invisible operating system. And guess where it lives? In ownership's head. You know which vendor needs to be called instead of emailed. You know where the unusual finish sample came from. You know the logic behind the folder names. You know what final actually means when there are 4 files labeled final. See, and that knowledge feels very efficient while you are available. And then when you're not, it becomes really dangerous. The decision to make sooner is that important knowledge cannot remain personal knowledge infinitely. It has to become institutional knowledge. Now, don't mishear me. You're probably thinking, oh my gosh, do I have to write a 400-page operations manual no one's ever going to read? No, absolutely not. In fact, I wouldn't recommend it. Instead, what we're talking about is identifying the information that would be difficult, expensive, or damaging to reconstruct. In fact, I recommend just starting with access. Who has access to critical software, banking relationships, vendor portals, client documentation, domains, social accounts, subscriptions, project systems? Are passwords stored securely? Does more than one appropriate person know where the key information lives? Then start looking at decisions. What standards do you use when approving specifications? What determines whether a project moves from one phase to another? And then I want you to look at relationships. Are important vendor and client contracts stored centrally, or are they buried in your phone? Could someone appropriately continue communication if you were unavailable? See, the objective is to stop making your constant presence a requirement for basic continuity. A business that cannot access its own knowledge without the owner, it's not organized. It is remarkably dependent, and that can start feeling downright suffocating. All right, decision 3, decide what must be protected before it is shared. So interior designers, we create valuable intellectual property constantly. In fact, we're on the phone with legal this week working through how we're going to even better protect it than we have been. We're creating plans and concept palettes, all sorts of things. And yet many designers are remarkably casual about how that work is owned, shared, photographed, reproduced, modified, credited, or marketed. And these questions often remain unaddressed until something uncomfortable happens, whether that client shares your presentation with another designer, or a contractor uses your plans beyond the original project, or a rendering is presented publicly without credit. A client maybe takes your concept and purchases substantially similar products independently. We just had a commercial client do that, which is why we're talking to legal. So the leadership decision comes before the legal language. You need to decide what you believe belongs to your firm and get on the phone with your attorney. What can the client use? For what purpose? At what stage? Can they modify the work? Can it be shared with third parties? Who owns that photography? How will AI generated or digitally altered representations of your work be addressed? And what happens if the project is never fully implemented? What portfolio rights apply to employees and contractors? So you do not wait for a painful situation, I wouldn't recommend it, to discover what you wish your agreement had said. Protection is not hostility. Clarity protects relationships because everyone understands what they are receiving and what remains yours. All right, let's talk about decision number 4. Decide which work belongs in your future portfolio. And one of the easiest ways to build the wrong business is to market every project equally. And not every completed project deserves the same visibility. I've seen lackluster living rooms and drop-dead gorgeous powder rooms. See, some projects paid well, but they do not represent the direction of your firm. And some were meaningful learning experiences, but they're going to attract the wrong inquiries if you put them out there. Many designers treat their portfolios as historical archives, and a much stronger approach is to treat the portfolio as a strategic filter. Your portfolio should not simply prove that you've been busy. It should communicate what you want to be hired to do next. And that's going to require a strategy decision from you as the owner. What do you want the market to believe you are exceptionally good at? And which project types support that belief? Which problems do you want to become known for solving? This may mean removing perfectly attractive work from your website, and that can feel totally wasteful. But I want to tell you right now, it is not. A portfolio is not a museum. It is a positioning tool. The work you feature teaches potential clients what to ask you for. And when your marketing is unfocused, the market brings you unfocused opportunities. And when your portfolio clearly demonstrates a specialty or an outcome or a level of expertise, guess what starts happening? It begins pre-qualifying work before the inquiry ever even reaches you. Make that decision before your pipeline is filled with projects that resemble your past, but do not support your future. I was just talking to a coaching client about that this week when she said, I have a pipeline of people I don't want. And I said, well, where did they all come from? And she goes, referrals. And I said, yeah, what are we doing to market to the people we want to market to? I'm not. And we switched our whole marketing plan around. All right, your 5th decision. Decide what happens if you can't work. And this is not the most glamorous business conversation, I'm going to be brutally honest with you, but it probably is one of the most important. What happens if you become unexpectedly unavailable? Not forever, but for 2 weeks, 30 days, 3 months. What actually happens? I hate to say it, but my kids and I were in a car wreck on Friday where we were the first car and the 4th car rear-ended the 3rd car, who rear-ended the 2nd car, who rear-ended us. What if something catastrophic had happened? Thankfully, it didn't. We were all fine and walked away. But who communicates with clients? Who can authorize payments and give access and active contacts? Who contacts your attorney and CPA and insurance broker or your banking representative? And do you have written instructions about how to do all this? See, don't get me wrong, many designers avoid this because it feels uncomfortable or overly dramatic, but I wanted to make sure and include it this week, especially having just been through a literal car wreck where our car is totaled. The business already carries risk, whether you're going to discuss it or not. If you're out and about in the world and you're the owner, guess what? There's risk. And ignoring it does not make you or your company any safer. This decision is especially important when the firm has employees or active procurement or client funds or purchasing commitments. Maybe it's installation schedules or contractual deadlines. So you're not merely protecting yourself, you're protecting your team and your clients and your family and your vendors and the reputation that you have spent years building. Create a basic continuity plan, name the people who need to be involved, and document where essential information is stored, and review your insurance and legal structures with qualified professionals. You hope this plan is never needed. I get it. That does not make creating it unnecessary. It makes creating it the responsible decision, not of a business owner, but of a CEO. All right, finally, I want you to decide whether you are building an asset or a job. And I kind of alluded to it in my last sentence. There's nothing wrong with owning a business that depends heavily on your personal talent. Many excellent design practices are intentionally owner-led, but here's where that gets dicey and sticky. When the owner believes she is building an independent company, but is actually building a highly demanding personal job. A business becomes an asset when value exists beyond the owner's daily labor, and that's going to include a trusted brand, documented processes, a diversified client base, repeatable services, a capable team, and protected intellectual property. See, do you want the ability to sell the firm someday? Do you want to bring in a partner or step back from the daily delivery? Maintain maybe a small practice that intentionally revolves around your personal work. All of these are valid questions, but they are very different in how you make your decisions. If you want this company to possess value beyond you, you're going to have to build that value deliberately. You cannot wait until you are ready to exit. Like one of my coaching clients said to me the other day, I want to leave in 5 years. And suddenly she wanted to make the company transferable in 2. In 2 years, she wanted to have a fully transferable company that did $1 million in gross last year, and she took home $70,000. See, transferability is built over years, and it's built by building value into the company, not just in your head. It is clean financials, clear agreements, retained knowledge, repeatable delivery, healthy client diversification, and most importantly, your leadership capacity. Because even if you never sell this business, building it with these principles gives you choices. And I don't know about you, but the older I get, the more I want to have options. And choices are one of the most valuable returns a business can ever provide, not just to you, but to itself. So I want you to do a future risk audit. This is your actionable exercise this week. I want you to draw 2 columns. And at the top of the first, I want you to write what currently depends too heavily on one thing. And at the top of the second, I want you to write what would reduce the dependency. And you're going to look across your entire business. I want you to think about, is there too much revenue depending on one client? Maybe too much project progress depends on one employee. Maybe access depends on one person's passwords. Choose the dependency with the greatest potential impact and then make one decision. Not an entire overhaul. I'm not asking you to do that. Just one decision. You may decide to document all critical account access this month. Maybe you decide to commission professional photography for 3 projects that actually represent your future positioning and where you want to take the company. Maybe you decide to create a 30-day continuity plan. See, the goal is not to make the firm invulnerable, because let's be honest, no business is. The goal is to make it less fragile than it was yesterday. Now, this belief, and there's a big one that is keeping many of you from making these decisions, is I will deal with that when the business is bigger. But bigger businesses do not become easier to protect. In fact, that's why your insurance premiums go up. They become much more complicated to untangle. And every year that important information remains undocumented, there is more information to reconstruct. And every year that your portfolio lacks direction, guess what? The market receives a less focused message. I want you to replace that with this new belief. And literally you can make this a mantra for yourself. I build resilience while the business is healthy. See, you do not create a continuity plan because you expect a crisis. You create it because the company matters. And you do not diversify because you distrust your best client. Instead, you're going to diversify because you want to serve that client from a position of stability rather than fear. And you do not protect intellectual property because you assume everyone has bad intentions. You protect it because ambiguity creates avoidable conflict. And you do not refine your portfolio because the past work was bad. Instead, you're refining it because your future deserves intentional representation. Some business decisions improve this month. Others protect the next 5 years. The decisions we discussed today may not produce an immediate surge in your revenue, and they may not create a dramatic announcement. They may never be visible to your audience, but they quietly determine how much choice you retain as the firm grows. Can you say no? Can you step away? Can you protect what you created? And are you able to change direction? That is the deep work of building a mature design firm. And it is a major part of the work I do with my coaching clients. We are not solving the loudest issue of the week. Instead, we are looking for those quiet vulnerabilities underneath the business, those dependencies, that undocumented knowledge, and the strategic drift, the places where success has created exposure, the decisions that feel unnecessary today, but these will become incredibly valuable later, because coaching is not just about helping you make more money or manage your calendar, despite what I feel like every other coach says on social media. It is about helping you see the business clearly enough to protect what you are actually building. And it is helping you move from being the person who reacts to every circumstance to the leader who prepares the firm for what is actually coming next and what you want to be there. So this week, ask yourself one question. Where is my business more fragile than it appears? And do not judge the answer. Instead, I want you to use what comes to mind. Identify one dependency and make one decision that protects your future options. And if you know the business has reached a level where the risks, opportunities, and decisions are becoming difficult to evaluate alone, well, this is where I help interior designers navigate, because we're looking beyond the immediate pressure. We identify what the actual business needs next. And we build a firm that is not only successful when everything goes according to plan, but is strong enough to respond when it doesn't. You worked too hard to build this business accidentally. Now is the time to protect it intentionally. If this rings a bell for you and you want to have a deeper conversation and stop making knee-jerk reactions and start building an actual business, come find me at fixmydesignbiz.com. Again, fixmydesignbiz.com. Remember, your business should be working for you, not you working for it. Until next time, take care.